Those feel significantly better than what I started out with. Hey guys, this is my Xenics Titan GR SE. It's effectively intended to be an EC2 clone that you might recognize because it's pretty much the same shape as the Pwnage Ultra Custom Ergo wireless. The difference here, two things. First, the Xenics doesn't have holes in the side, so when you use the solid top cover, it's the closest thing that I think you can get to a hole-free EC2 clone. It's actually kind of partway between an EC2 and an outset, so I actually like it more. But the other thing is the switches. So the Pwnage mice use Kailh GM 8s on their Gen 2 with the 3370 sensors. This doesn't. This still uses Omron 20 millions. So having used the mouse for a while, my assessment of it is that I don't think this is even a particularly nice implementation of the Omron 20 mil. I can't tell. I think they're slightly over-tensioned, i.e. the switch isn't totally and completely extending when you let go of it, of the button. Because the clicks feel kind of flat, like they don't spring back the way you'd expect. And sometimes when you click them, they just don't feel like they have almost any tactility or kind of crispness to them. So especially the left click, and especially when your fingers are near the front of the mouse. Anyway, so I wanted to swap them out, and I figured I'd include some tidbits of information for anybody who might be considering this as an option. For reference, you can get this guy imported from sellers on eBay. They only are sold normally in Korea, but you can get these for about 80 bucks, which is $30 cheaper than what you'd pay for the Pwnage mice, and you can get, you know, no holes on the side, which I preferred. So if you're somebody who's used to swapping your own switches and you want to try an EC2 outset AX kind of hybrid shape with a good sensor and no holes where you grab it, then this is for 80 bucks is a very reasonable option. But yeah, anyway, so to start with, only holes under the rear skates. And the skates, I believe, are Tiger Arc 2s. They say they're Tiger skates on the website. And just using a spudger like this, I was able to pop them loose with hardly any damage or effect on the adhesive on the skates. So they're kind of reminiscent of the IntelliMouse skates in that way. But yeah, so you only need to remove the rear skates if you're going to do a switch swap of your own. The top can kind of be disassembled. This rear cover is removable, and you can pop out the triggers as well, just like the Pwnage mice, where they brag about these parts being, you know, interchangeable, and you can buy fancy ones in different colors. And they're slightly held in with magnets, but they're easy enough to remove by hand. So anyway, if I come up with anything else particularly surprising about the mouse that you might want to know, I'll include it in the video. But other than that, I'm going to get to swapping out these switches. All right, so with those two screws out, the two halves of the mouse came apart pretty easily. It's not like a glorious Model D wireless where there's massive stiff clips inside that you really have to work at to get free. There is just this one 3-wire cable connecting the two halves of the shell, so don't pull it apart too aggressively, is basically what I'm getting at. You don't have to really the thing loose. Other than that, it's nice to see that the thumb switches are mounted into the top of the shell and that they use a normal 3-pin switch. So I might swap those out because they're a little bit, they're not bad at all, but they're slightly lackluster perhaps. So I might swap those out. And you can see here that they are using the OF variant Omron 20 mils. So those are the like increased tactility sort of sub variant of the 20 mils that Extrafy also use in the M4. I don't know if they use it in their other mice, but at least in the M4, that's the variant of the Omron 20mm that they use. And so far I can see 3 screws, 2 holding a battery cover in place, and 1 through the PCB. And it looks like, oh, this is interesting. Check this out. Their LED, I believe, for the scroll wheel is just kind of awkwardly mounted up with some twisted wire prongs to just get it at a right angle so that it happens to shine inside. But it's just kind of hanging out there. It doesn't have like a little bracket to sit in or anything. Funky. Okay, a couple more things. First of all, the scroll click switch is mounted up on this kind of riser block. So I believe it's similar to the switches used in the Glorious Model D wireless, where they have an extended pin length on them. It's also mounted backwards from the main switches and uses a Huano, which appears to have a blue dot, but the bottom half of the shell is gray. I don't believe they're exactly the same as this isn't a Huano black shell blue dot like you'd find in a Zowie mouse or something. I don't think it's the same switch as that internally. Also, they've included some little foam pieces on the bottom of the PCB here to stop the pins from making electrical contact with anything through the honeycomb bottom shell of the mouse, which I thought was interesting. It was just those 3 screws, by the way. The DPI button appears to be a 2-pin generic unmarked switch with a blue plunger. Height appears to be normal, like the 7.3mm Kailh Silent could probably replace this switch just fine if your DPI button goes bad for some reason. And let's see, how easy is it to, work the scroll wheel loose there. Okay. And any indication of what encoder we've got? It's a tall boy for sure, probably an 11mm. Can I see a brand name? The only thing I see that looks like a brand marking is F switch. F, the letter F hyphen switch. So, not one I'm familiar with. But it's reasonably quiet and tactile. So I do like it so far. I'll see how the durability is on it, but yeah. All right, here we go. We've got our DIY Pwnage Ultra Custom with no holes on the side, i.e. I put GM8s into the Xenics instead of Omrons. So, gonna take a look at swapping out those thumb switches, lube the scroll wheel, and get to reassembling. This is interesting. The thumb switches are actually what appear to be totally normal Huano black shell yellow dots. All right, there we are. Got them swapped out. Time to start putting stuff back together. All right, doing a test fit after having swapped the switches. I want to see if the GM8s also have a bit of that feeling of being over-tensioned. Basically, I'm trying to figure out if the reason I didn't like the clicks was just the switches and the shell design with how they were implemented, or if it was actually that the buttons couldn't lift up high enough to let the switches fully extend and reset properly. So yeah, so these remind me of the Pulsar X Lite right now in stock form, which also felt like they were over tensioned like this, and it has that same sort of feeling of being very inconsistent with how it bounces back. and just generally not having as much click travel or as much tactility as I would expect. So I think I do need to grind away a little bit of the material that prevents the buttons from moving, and free up a little bit more total button travel to get a nicer click feel. So for anybody who hasn't seen my other videos talking about this, the areas I'm looking at are this guy right here and his partner friendo on the other side right here. And sorry, technically trying to point at it there, that guy right there. And what those do is, these are your buttons, right? Here are the parts that actually push on the switch. And what they do is they sit kind of around this little tooth-shaped thing here. So if I put that on, see how those line up there? And if they're actually installed fully, come on, there we go. They actually sit inside there. So that piece is now back inside this part that moves when you push the button, right? So what those do, they don't stop the button from being pushed down like this. They stop the button from coming back like this when you let go. So if you push and release, that little tooth is preventing this button from lifting higher up. And the idea behind it is to make sure that you don't have really rattly buttons or like loose pre-travel on the mouse, which is a good thing. But if you take it too far, then it actually can't lift up as far as it should go. And so what I'm going to do to address this is I'm going to go through and take off a little bit of this material here so that the buttons can come up slightly higher. If I take off too much, that's okay. What I'll actually do is add a little bit of something like this fabric band-aid material, and I'll put it inside this little pocket here that bumps up against the tooth. So I'll add some material back, but also what I'll do is add a softer material instead of a hard plastic. And this means there's a little bit of give or cushion. So you can get it, if you do it just right, where it doesn't have any rattle or pre-travel, but it's under significantly less tension when it's, at the buttons at sort of full extension, like when it's resetting. And so you don't get this same over-tensioned feel happening as easily, or you have much better control over it. Ideally, you get the spacing just right so that it does fully extend and doesn't go past that at all. But if you want a way to ensure that there will be zero button rattle, having it a tiny bit over tensioned, like some 1/10 of a millimeter, and then using this type of material as the sort of mediator that creates that extra 1/10 of a mil of pressure, or something else that's adhesive and softer than hard plastic, that will let you get rid of that tiniest bit of rattle without introducing as much tension on the switch. And so it'll help the click feel not be ruined or affected the same way. So I've got this little kind of jeweler's file, which is only a file on this side, this back side. It does have a sharp corner, but it's not actually a filing surface. So I'm going to stick this in here so that it gets on top of, right there, on top of that pre-travel limiter, or up travel limiter, and I'm going to just file away some of that material. And then I'll pop it in here and repeat on this side. All right, I'm not sure how clearly you'll be able to see it, but you hopefully see some scratch marks at least on the surface of those teeth. So now that I've taken some material off, I'm going to try reassembling the mouse and doing another click test. All right, click test number 2 after first attempt at filing. Okay. Still no rattle there. So that just shows how over-tensioned these were, that I could take off material from that side and still not have any rattle. About over here. Yep, still no rattle either. Okay, how does it feel? Oh yeah, you can definitely detect that there's more travel to this switch in total, and it feels sort of healthier overall. It's closer to like a Vaxi outset kind of switch travel. I mean, it's not there yet, but it's heading that direction compared to where we started. Okay, I think I would call this right click good. The left click still needs some more work. It's about where the right click was when I started, which means it's hopefully about halfway there. Click test number 3 after having filed the left mouse up travel limiter some more. So I took off a significant amount of material this time, and you can see that there's now rattle there. So, you know, you can say, well, okay, now we've gone too far, so probably going to have to add some material to limit the up travel further. Try to get it right back to that area where it's just right. But yeah, you can definitely tell that that switch is now traveling its full distance. So obviously this is also a sign that that's happening. I think I might want to take a small amount more off of the, off the right mouse button as well. You can tell it's just a little bit over tension compared to something like this where you know there's no tensioning on it. Okay, so first things first, we chop a small strip of this fabric loose, and then we're going to turn it into pieces that we can mount inside the gaps back there. So since we know the left mouse button needs a little bit of help, I'm going to put it in on that side. I inspected how this all goes together. So let me get it to focus. And you can see how there's a little bar in the middle there. Right there by about part of the way down. So it turns out that that bar is what's actually stopping the up travel rather than this space down here at the very bottom. So I need to put it on top of that little bar. So we'll take our piece of material here and we'll fish it inside there. Try to place it on top of that bar. There we go. Okay. Let me try to make sure it's all sitting flat inside there. And now, oh, nope, it's not. You can see it's riding up on one side and it's slightly curved. So I'm going to try and redo that one. If I can get a hold of it with my tweezers. The very end of these don't grip all that well. Yeah, and they're tearing it up. Okay, so we'll get it out of here, but this will probably be the end of this piece of fabric-y tape stuff. We'll replace it with a different one. Okay, so that guy's removed. And we'll swap him out in favor of a new one. So We'll try this again. See if we can get it right. So, try to make sure my camera work is helpful. Maybe. Okay, there we go. That's better, I think. All right, trying to make sure it all sits flat. Oh yeah, that's what you want to see. So, right there. Sitting nice and flat, and pretty much goes all the way to the back of that gap. So that is good. Now, I'm just going to take a bit more material off of the one here for the right click. See if we can't get it to where we're confident it is not having its up travel limited either. All right, click test number 4, having added some pre-travel limiting to this side and taken a bit more material off here. Check for rattle. So you can see, having added that piece of tape, it's now, oh, come on, autofocus. There's just maybe the tiniest bit of rattle that's allowed, but almost all of it's gone. So how does that feel? Oh yeah, feels just as good of a click as it did before. So we haven't gone back to over tensioning it. And it doesn't make any odd, annoying noises unless you're deliberately trying to bend the thing out of shape. So yeah, trying to imitate like sweaty fingers picking up off the button. Like if you do this with a G403, a stock one, you'll get lots of rattle from the spring tensioning, and you're getting nothing off this mouse. So that's good. Left mouse is done. We're happy with that. How about right mouse? Do we have any rattle? No, we don't. How's the click feel? Okay, I might call that just a tiny hair over tensioned, but probably a small enough difference that it's not worth trying to chase. Yeah, maybe another couple passes with a file would improve it the tiniest of bits, but that's close enough to how the left click feels that I'm perfectly happy with that. Yep, that's good. I like that. I'm happy to game with that. So, alrighty, so here's a final look at everything before it all goes back together. Bottom plate. And you can see added some lubrication here where it rides against the plastic, as well as on this side back there. And then I put a little bit in through the center of the hole here. I don't know that it'll necessarily do anything, but it tends to feel like it stabilizes the scroll wheel just a little bit and helps make it even quieter. And because there's no tactility from it bumping against the plastic that it's trying to spin inside of, you actually get a more clear sense of feedback from the encoder steps. So it doesn't actually make the scroll wheel more tactile, but it reduces some sort of tactile noise, I guess, that's distracting and helps you feel the steps of the encoder more clearly. I don't know. Obviously, it's arguably not permanent because I don't know if this lube will last, hold itself in place forever, but it's pretty clingy, and the improvement is significant enough to me to justify doing it to my mice. So yeah. And then our top shell, and we did all of our pre-tensioning or pre-travel and tensioning work, as well as our Huano blue shell white dot side switches, which are a little bit firmer and more tactile than the ones that were in there before. So now we just got to plug this guy back in. we go. Click. We can finish putting these guys all back together. And for anybody who's hasn't been told, do not over tighten screws that are in plastic threads. Please, it is not worth it. Yep, those feel significantly better than what I started out with. Cool. Alright guys, if you have any questions about what I did or anything, I'm going to go fiddle around with this for a few minutes, just make sure I'm totally happy with it before I throw the skates back on. But yeah, hope this was helpful for any who are curious, or anybody who just wanted to see this mouse opened up and taken apart, in case you were thinking about doing this yourself and you already have the tools and just weren't as confident in breaking your nice $80 wireless mouse open. Pretty straightforward and not too hard to work on. So yeah, definitely not my least favorite design. All right guys, have a good one.